What's up, guys? So recently I was learning about SVG filters, and I come across this wonderful combo, feTurbulence and feDisplacement map. So I have this REPL over here that demonstrates how it has effects on um, an element. So if you don't know, SVG filters is that you can define a filter in SVG, and then within an element you can apply the filter via a URL, and this is the ID of that filter over here, right? So feTurbulence and feDisplacement. So over here I have a few knobs that tunes the value of base frequency for the turbulence and the scale for the displacement map, right? So the scale will tune. Let's see how it goes. Right. So the scale will tune like how much turbulence you will affect the text or the element itself, and the frequency actually tunes like I don't know, like how big or how wavy the turbulence is, right? So if I fix the frequency over here, even if I have a bigger scale, it will like turn from normal text to like a big wavy. If I fix like frequency to be very high, then you have like smaller speckles of the text. So let's see again from scale 0 all the way to 100, right? So while playing with this, I was thinking about whether we can create a custom transition using this SVG filter, which means that probably when the elements comes in, it starts from 100 and goes all the way to 0, appears on the screen, and when it exits, it will tune the scale from 0 to 100, where it just breaks into a million pieces and then fades away, right? So today I'm going to try and see whether we can create this SVG filter as a custom transition. So over here I have my starter code. So in this starter code, it's a very basic setup. Basically, I have a checkbox that when I tick and untick, you will see the text being shown and hidden, right? So what I'm going to do is to start writing a custom transition. So let me think of a name. Probably I call it wavy custom transition. So it should return an object. And to use this transition, I'm going to, over here, transition wavy. Okay, so the next thing is I need to figure out how to use this SVG filter. I can define the filter. Let's see, I can define the filter in the starter over here, right? And probably get a variable base frequency and let's scale, right? So so probably what I can do is that in this code, I'm going to apply a filter to the element that I'm going to apply the transition, right? So over here, I'm going to say node dot style equals dot filter equals to URL wave, wave, right? So you will apply the filter to the node, right? And now the next thing is I'm gonna have so I need to change the value of the turbulence as I transition in and out, right? So probably I'm gonna use the tick function over here. So the tick function will be called on every frame when your browser tries to paint the element, and the t value is the time. It goes from 1 to 0 if you are exiting, if you are removing the element, and if it goes from 0 to 1 when you want to add the element in, right? So probably what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change the scale value. So the t goes from 0 to 1, and I'm going to calculate the value of scale, which should goes from 0 to 100, right? So probably scale equals to t times 100. That would do the scaling, and let's see how it turns out. Oh, okay. Okay, so I think what we're missing over here is the base frequency. So the base frequency, I'm gonna give a random value which is 0.55 over here, which is good, right? Which is exactly what we are trying to go for, except it's not removing the elements, which I'm not really sure why. And oh wait, oh I think I get the other way around. So um, it's coming in, and this is the final end state of 1. So probably, so 0 is when it's not in the screen, and 1 is when it's in the screen, right? So probably the scale should be going from 100 to 0, where 100 is it breaks into million pieces, and 0 is like no filter, right? So to do that, I'm gonna flip the value of t. So flipping it will be 1 minus t, right? So 1 minus t will go from 1 minus 0 is 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0, right? So 1 minus t times 100. Let's try that again. Wow, perfect. This is exactly what I'm trying to go for. Right, good. Okay, so now the next thing is I want to have some slight delay on the second text. It should comes in later on before the hello world. So I'm going to add a delay over here, say 500 millisecond, and then a duration for both. I'm going to have 1 second, right? So whatever you're passing in over here as an argument would come in as here as params, and you can return that uh, to the to this function, to this object, and that will be passed into Svelte to handle this transition. So by default the delay will be 0, right? I think one thing I want to try is that the I'm gonna have a default of duration for 1 second, right? So I'm gonna be fall back to this, and duration would be fall back to 1000 params duration, right? So let's see. Wait, there. So what's happening over here? It looks like the transition is applied twice, halfway. So okay, well I see. I know what's happening now. So the same filter is applied to the same element to both elements, and because the same filter is applied to both elements, and because we are changing the scale of the filter, it's applying to both elements at the same time. So even though there's a delay, actually the delayed transition will override um, the filter for the first filter. So uh, let's try to remove the duration, and you will, so sorry, not remove but set it to say 300 milliseconds. So I'm choose this value because it's smaller than 500 as a delay, right? So technically this element should transition finish, and then 200 milliseconds later this element should transition, right? So yeah, as you can see, the elements, both elements are transitioned together 2 times, right? Because they are both applied to the same filter, and because we set the scale and frequency for the filter for the first time, and then for the second element, but because they are actually applying to the same filter, uh, the filter will apply to both elements. So there you go, like 2 transitions happening, uh, one after the other. So how should we solve this issue? So I'm thinking that so yeah, so one way to solve this is to create the SVG elements um, on demand, only if when we need to transition an element, right? And then probably come up with a custom ID so that we just apply that custom ID to the element itself. So to do this, one way I can think of a quick way to do it is actually to create a Svelte element. Well, we can just create more elements when we need it, right? So here we have SVG, paste it in, and probably we're gonna have script, export that. ID, so this will be ID, okay. Okay, so now what we're gonna do over here is that we're gonna import this SVG filter. And we're gonna use it, we're gonna create this over here. So how we're gonna create this is, we can manually, we can add it here, and every time when we have, like, can use it here every time when we have a new element that we want to transition. But I'm thinking of doing, use the components API from Svelte, which is we can create a new SVG filter component. Probably we target it to the body. So this will create a new component, render a new SVG filter every time when we do this, right? So SVG filter. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna find out the ID, because so we want to have a different ID every time when we create an SVG filter. One way we can do that is that we can have a module level variable. So over here I call index, and every time when we create a new component, we can create a new ID for this component. So I'm going to call it wave/idx++. Right, so every time we increment the idx, and then we get a new ID. So over here we can use that ID and apply it to the element itself. So note the style.filter equals to URL. Over here we're gonna pass in the ID for this filter. Right. So can remove this. Okay, so every time we create a new filter, right? And then next thing is we need okay, so instead of changing the variable scale and base frequency, we're gonna change the scale and base frequency of this SVG filter, right? So what we can do here is that we can use the set API, set scale, and sorry, yep, and let's try it out. Okay, let's see what's going wrong. Props cannot be read directly from component instance. Oh no, this is let's see. We applied filters. Let's inspect element. We can figure this out. Let's inspect element. So there's an SVG created with 0, and do we apply that? Okay, so let's see. It's not applied through the node itself. There's nothing changed over here. I think there's a runtime error over here. Try again. let's apply this. Oh, cool. Okay, so I guess what this trying to say is that we can access the value of ID without compiling for turning on the accessor, so that we can't access like SVG filter.id from the component without turning on this flag in the compiler in Svelte component. Okay, cool. Today I learned. So it looks like it's working, right? Looks pretty good. Okay, I think this is complaining that both base frequency and scale does not have default value. Never mind, I'm gonna add it here. Yep, no complaints. Looks pretty cool. Let's see. So let's inspect element again and see what's actually happening, right? So this, oh, sorry. So let me zoom this in a bit. Right, so this is the element. Sorry, the next one is the element, right? So when we turn it off, and let me close this thing for a second. So when we turn it on and turn it off, we create new SVG element, new filter, and then we apply the URL over here, and then we change the scale value for this filter, and then it's applied to the element itself. So one thing you notice that is that the SVG, we have created a lot of SVG elements and we didn't clean it up, right? So we are going to do it now. So let's write a cleanup, which is to remove SVG, right? So this dot, let's see, I think it's called destroy, right? And let's see, so when should we call cleanup? So when we have transition, there's a custom event dispatch on the element itself when the transition ends, which is intro end and outro end. So let me add event listener intro end. So we're gonna call cleanup for that. And whoops, there's another one called outro end. So depending whether it's intro or outro, when it ends, they will dispatch this custom event, and because we listen to it, we'll call this cleanup. And in the cleanup, we should also listen to this event listener over here. Remove. Right. So let's take a look again. So over here we have only no SVG. Yep. So you see as the transition ends. As the transition ends, the SVG is removed. Right. I guess now what's happening is that the ending transition is not it's not applying the SVG filters. Let's try again. So you come in, the SVG filter is removed, and when we click this, it's not creating a new SVG filter element. That's because it's actually reusing the same. So this function only creates when the first time when we are like adding these elements or removing these elements, right? Especially when it's not in a screen. So it's created the first time when it's trying to add this element, and when it removes this element, you will just reuse this object over here to apply the transition, right? So that's why over here when we intro end, we remove the SVG filter, right? So it's gone. So we can't apply the can apply filter to it anymore, right? So, but then we have to add an intro n or outro n, um, because if you're not removing any anymore, we still have a still SVG filter laying there. So how about we can, for here, let's see. Probably I think there's an event called intro start and outro start, which does the opposite, which is to create, which we call before when the intro outro begins, right? So over here I'm gonna call create, and I'm gonna create the SVG element over here, SVG filter. So I'll create a new filter when the intro starts. So with this, and I need to clean this up. Remove intro start, create, create, create. Okay, it's a bit messy. Let me close this up, and I think this is much better to read, right? Let me clean this up a bit. So clean this up. Right, so clean this up. Okay, probably let me shift this around. Wait, not that. Okay, we can group this together. Okay, so intro start, outro start, we're going to call create, and we'll call the cleanup, right? And over at the very beginning, we declare a variable called SVG filter, which will be created during create, which is when the intro is starting, and will be removed in the cleanup when the intro ends. Right, so let's see. Oh wait, what? It doesn't work. Do I get the wrong? Let's see. Probably there's a okay. Probably SVG filter. Hmm. Okay. It's should remove this event listeners on cleanup for all of them, right? Wait, should I? Should I not? Start because the outro start is not being called because we call the create. Okay. I know. Um, Probably gonna duplicate this for a bit. So this is the create for intro, and this is gonna be create for outro. Create intro, outro. Let's try that again. Yep, it looks good, except it should be. So next thing is we need to set the opacity a bit, right? So it doesn't like fade out exactly. So what I'm going to try here is that if so t again goes from 0 to 1, and I'm going to have an opacity of say when it reaches 0.25, I'm going to slowly move to uh, from 1 to 0, right? So it's more like t from 0.5 to 0.25 to 0, we're going to opacity from 1 to 0 so that it doesn't fade immediately, it fades towards the last quarter of the time. So how we can do that is t, if it's less than 0.25, we're going to set opacity to a value. And if it's not, then we're just not doing apply any CSS to it. Or rather, opacity is 1. And over here, I'm going to calculate this. So this is going to times 4 to get 1. So t times 4. Right, so let's try again. Hold on a sec. I have a syntax error. So this should be returned. Okay, so right, it fades out exactly where we want it to be. Right, cool. So let's set a duration so that you can see. Okay, so this is gonna have a duration of 1 second. Right, looks cool, right? So this is how you're gonna create a custom transition with SVG filters, guys. This is really cool. So I'm gonna send you the link of this example down in the description. So please check that out and play it out. Custom transitions, yo. So thank you for staying till the end. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay notified with my next video, please hit the subscribe button down below. As always, stay safe and well. See you next time.